So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Our topic tonight is going to be on planning and funding transportation infrastructure across the greater Philadelphia region. Before we begin talking more about tonight's meeting and about DVRPC, I just want to make sure that everybody understands how to interact with us and how to engage tonight using this virtual platform. So first and foremost, please use the chat box to ask questions and share comments. Some of y'all have already done that tonight. We can see your questions and your comments on the back end. And if you have a question that we would like to respond to live, we will hold on to it and respond to it live. So please definitely use and abuse the chat box tonight. That's also where we'll be sharing links to more information that you can go learn more about all of the presentation, the presenters later on after this meeting. Raise your hand if you have a question during the live Q&A portion. So after two of our presentations, we have a live Q&A portion. So please feel free to raise your hand to ask questions during that time. And the biggest thing to understand is that we are here tonight with a large group of residents from across 9 different counties. So please be mindful and courteous with others when they're sharing their opinions or if they're sharing their thoughts or questions. We're all coming from very different places and have very different values and needs and wants for our community. And that's what we're all here tonight to do, is to advocate and learn more about how we can support our community. So tonight's presentations include a presentation from Mani Bay on planning the future of the greater Philadelphia region, a presentation from Ethan Fogg on what is the Transportation Improvement Program and why is it important. We have a presentation from Allison Dressman on the tip selection process and resident feedback. And then finally, we have a presentation from Tom Stanikinis of Burlington County, and he's going to be presenting on Burlington County from community need to community projects. So we have a lot of really great presentations tonight about how DVRPC uses federal money to fund and support investments across the greater Philadelphia region. Before we begin with our presentations, for anybody who may be new to DVRPC, this is just a little bit of background on the agency. We are an NPO. We've been here since 1965, and we advise on urban and transportation planning across the Philadelphia region. That includes 9 counties, 5 on the Pennsylvania side and 4 on the New Jersey side. We do this by convening our city, county, and state representatives to talk about a lot of key issues. And one of those key issues is how we can better support resident engagement and better educate our residents on the work that's being done in their communities. DVRPC also provides planning analysis, data collection, mapping services, and federal funding opportunities. We are in a lot of places, so you may not have heard of us, but we are positive that one of the projects or one of the studies we've done has impacted your community somewhere, somehow. And then within DVRPC, we have the Public Participation Task Force. That is a task force that is sponsoring tonight's meeting. It is a forum that is for residents of the 9 counties that we work with and some outside to come together to learn more about the work we do and learn more about how they can bring our work into their community. So the PPTF provides ongoing access to the regional planning and decision-making process. A lot of our great PPTF members who are online tonight, they share a lot of information about the work that we do across the organization. Yes, Shoshana?
The slides aren't advancing on this end. I don't know if everybody else is experiencing that. So I don't know how you're sharing screen. That's not going to the next one.
Is everybody not seeing my?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, I'm so sorry, everyone.
No, totally. Like you were describing it so well. I was like, I think this is what you wanted to do, but there you go. Go ahead.
So yeah, this is a PPTF, and if anybody was confused, this is DVRPC, and then we'll just now go to our recent DVRPC publication to show you a little bit more about the work we do. Jonathan?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Alexander, and I'm the 2024 DVRPC Planning Fellow. Could you move the slide forward, Wendell?
Yeah, it's still on the what is the PPTF slide.
Technical difficulties. I am so sorry, y'all. Alrighty. How's it going now?
Perfect.
Good, better. Thank you.
Thank you.
The New Jersey Transportation Improvement Program document includes listings of transit, highway, bridge, bicycle, pedestrian, and multimodal projects for the New Jersey region. You can read more about this publication on DVRPC's website to find financial tables, conformity findings, public involvement, and more. The Plan TIP project evaluation criteria is developed to align with the Connections 2050 Long Range Plan and Federal Transportation Performance Management Targets. You can read more about this publication on DVRPC's website to see how data-driven decision-making helps compare and prioritize projects in the Long Range Plan and the TIP. There's an upcoming workshop on the intersection of complete streets and crime prevention through environmental design on June 4th to June 5th. The workshop explores how design and space management enhance community safety and build social efficacy. Each day will have the same information and format with an optional night field session on June 5th. This is a list of upcoming events on the DVRPC calendar. On Thursday, May 23rd, we have the board and executive committee meeting. On June 4th to the 5th, we have workshops on the complete streets and crime prevention through environmental design. On June 11th, we have the Regional Technical Committee, or the RTC meeting. And on June 11th, we have the public comment period meeting for the draft 2025 TIP for PA and Connections 2050. You can find more information about upcoming meetings on DVRPC's calendar. Thank you, and we look forward to your participation and continued collaboration in these upcoming events.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now we'll begin our first presentation. Amani?
I think I'm first for the public comment.
You can go now if you would like to.
No, isn't it on the next slide? I thought I was after Jonathan.
It was 20. Yeah. We can go now.
Oh, totally fine. It was just in there in the presentation, so sorry about that. But this is still helpful for everybody to kind of get a little information on the public comment periods before we get into the topic. So as Wendell had talked about earlier, we are the MPO for the Greater Philly region, and because of that, we need to host a public comment period for every major critical planning document. We don't do it for every single document that we put out there. That would be way too many public comment periods. We want to make sure that we have other ways that we talk to the public. But for our major documents that are required by the federal government, we do a public comment period, and we're having them coming up on the TIP and the long range plan, which is part of why we're also doing this meeting at this time. So what we do for the public comment period, we put out a legal notice in newspapers. We send documents to the library, so it's not all on online stuff. And we make sure that we reach the tribal governments, we notify our board, we promote on social media, and we send out a newsletter to our public participation audience. And so for this current public comment period, which is starting on May 23rd at 5 p.m., we're going to take comments on the long range plan and the TIP. We also have a second public comment period that's related to that one, because with the long range plan TIP, we also have to have an air quality conformity for the updates to that plan. So that second public comment period will be starting on June 4th. All of this is on our website, so you don't have to memorize these dates now. You can go to the next slide. So you can get copies of all of these documents on our website. Gina also just dropped them in the chat. You can also submit public comments by mail, email, or in person. And if you want, you can sign up for our public participation and public notices newsletter so that you get proactively you proactively get an email when the public comment period opens. So you don't have to put that date in your calendar. And as Jonathan mentioned, you can also come to the public meeting. We actually have two, one on June 11th and one on the day before on June 10th. So you can find both of those meetings on our calendar. So Wendell, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Shoshana. And Shoshana may be back later on to remind you guys of the public comments. Now to get along with the presentations, Amani.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Amani Bay. I'm a planner in the Office of Long Range Planning, and I'm excited to be here with you all to share a brief overview of our region's long range plan, Connections 2050. So a long range plan is a fiscally constrained financial plan for investing in transportation infrastructure based on the region's visions and strategies. So what that looks like for us in our region is spending over $67.3 billion from 2022 to 2050 on about over 250 projects, both funded and unfunded, on what we call a vision list. Preserving our system and making improvements to facilities in the region, including transit lines and stations, bridges, interchanges, safety improvements, bike trails, and sidewalk improvements. So one of the projects, which we call our major regional projects, is in the city of Trenton for traffic signal upgrades at about 127 signals, and they will be interconnected by 2040. Another example is SEPTA's trolley modernization project, which stretches between Philadelphia and Delaware County, and it'll replace the existing trolleys with longer vehicles where folks can get on with wheelchairs, walkers, strollers, and shopping carts. There will be new on-street stations, as well as operational improvements to the facilities and the signals to make service faster, safer, and more reliable. And there will be some extension for trolley routes as well. So to learn more about these types of projects, Connections 2050 really exists in about 3 different documents. You have our policy manual, which it contains the vision, principles, goals, and of course, policies and strategies, and a summary of our financial plan. And then you have the process manual, which is a bit more technical companion report, which outlines the different projects, as well as their cost and timing and their relation to the vision. And it also has a detailed environmental justice analysis as well. We also have amendments to the plan as the plan follows the TIP. And we'll talk more about that towards the end. So how do we get to spending $67.3 billion? Well, we start with the public and stakeholders, including county governments, state transportation departments, and transit agencies in our region, such as PATCO, PART, SEPTA, and New Jersey Transit. And we really consider what's shaping the region. So each plan update, we're identifying trends and forces and working with the public to get towards a vision. We have metrics like job growth, population, land consumption, and we also make predictions about the future, such as conducting exploratory scenario planning. 2050 is about 25 years out, and we don't have a crystal ball to tell us what's going on. So we work with our futures group, where you can look at some of our reports that we have there for scenarios on the region, for the region, in terms of like political, economic futures, as well as a report specifically on highly automated vehicles. And when you hear that, you can think of like self-driving cars. So that vision for the future for the Connections 2050 plan, it was centered around an equitable, resilient, and sustainable Greater Philadelphia region that preserves and restores the natural environment. It develops inclusive and healthy and walkable communities, and maintains a safe multimodal transportation network that serves everyone, grows an innovative and connected economy with broadly shared prosperity. And each of these focus groups has associated goals and many more strategies that go along with it. But every year, every 4 years, DVRPC has to update their long range plan to keep the region eligible for what comes out to be almost $2 billion a year in state and federal transportation funds. And in that update of the vision, we reached out to over 20 neighborhood events by tabling. We reached out to folks via a survey, sending newsletters. We coordinated with several groups. We also had a focus group with folks who belong to low-income communities and communities of color on their transportation needs. And we really asked people, how much do you agree with the vision that we had in 2050? What would you change about it? What were your top strategies for achieving the goals outlined in the vision? And then we also are proposing an energy and climate vision statement, which is related to a reliable, affordable, and prosperous net zero emissions future, which allows our region to be resilient to the effects of climate change. So our vision has a lot of lofty goals and ideals within, so we needed to identify strategies to achieve that vision, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. But related to transportation network that serves everyone, we have a goal to achieve Vision Zero. Within walkable communities, there's a goal to help in the ways that we can to proliferate affordable housing and integrated communities. For preserving and restoring the environment, we have a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And in the economy with broadly shared prosperity, we have goals to enhance workforce skills and green the economy. So each of these goals has a list of strategies aligned with them, including so for net zero greenhouse gas emissions, we will be looking to support in the ways that we can electrification of transportation and buildings, and encouraging energy efficient government services, which is some of the work that we have on our planning program throughout the years. DVRPC. There's been studies on vehicle electrification in Burlington and Camden counties. There's been solar energy purchasing agreement research. There's been work related to climate change as well. And for our goal to safely accommodate all modes of transportation across the network for all users of all abilities, we have strategies such as making transit more attractive and easy to use, increasing service frequency, and pursuing transit first strategies. So DVRPC is first and foremost a transportation agency. So we are responsible for working with our partners and stakeholders to come up with financial plans that move towards that vision. But first, we needed to understand what we needed. So we have a regional transportation need that far exceeds the amount of funding that we were expecting to have from 2022 to 2050, and that's funding from the federal government as well as state governments. And so with that shortfall, and the plan being a blueprint for prioritizing transportation funding over that time, we created a capital vision, which is outlined in this purple here of what we need versus what we can actually afford. And the blue shows you New Jersey, whereas the purple shows you Pennsylvania. And here's another visualization, of the difference between what we were able to allocate versus the need that was shown in the region in order to meet our goals. So as I mentioned before, the plan does focus mainly on maintaining our existing infrastructure and allocating about 75% of available roadway revenue to system preservation activities. but we do spend on bicycle and pedestrian expansion and improvement, as well as roadway operational improvements. And we have a hard cap at 4% on our roadway system expansion investments. Here's just a quick look at the transit funds. So how did we make that choice? Once we had an understanding of how we might, how much we will be able to expect to be able to spend and how we'd like to spend it, we evaluated the merit of each project with its alignment to our visions, goals, and strategies through benefit criteria, with safety being ranked as the highest, keeping our facility and assets in good condition, coming close behind. And we've actually updated these criteria, so we'll see new scores next go around. And that is where we were able to actually decide on projects based on those that ranked well in our evaluation criteria. So what you would see on a major regional projects list, which is in the web map on our plans website, would show you the large projects in our area that have been included in the plan based on their alignment with our policies, as well as the fiscal reality, which is we didn't have we didn't have the proper amount of funds to spread it to everything that we needed. So the web map is interactive, where you can zoom into certain areas to see what's going on in your neighborhood, as well as filtering by the different project types here. Another part of implementation of the long range plan outside of the transit projects are also different ways that we implement. We have our unified planning work program, which I mentioned before. We also have the municipal implementation toolbox, which serves as a guide for municipalities to help implement our goals. And you can filter by principle in the plan as well as focus area. And it gives you really cool case studies and resources and even example ordinances and metrics as well from our track and progress to measure. We also evaluate the plan by looking at track and progress, which I mentioned before. And then we have a environmental justice analysis in the plan as well, which looks at adverse effects and benefits of projects to ensure that they're not disproportionately affecting folks who have been underserved or discriminated against by federal policy in the past. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and say thank you for your time. And I'm pretty sure we're putting questions into the Q&A box.
We have a little bit, we could take one question. Actually, Guy Anthony K. Brooks mentioned accessibility to the panelists. Guy, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and talk a little bit for like 30 seconds about what that means to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon. My name is Guy Anthony Brooks. I live in West Philadelphia of the Philadelphia region. My pet peeve is the issue about accessibility. You know, the ADA was signed in 1990, and till today, the word access and accessibility should be said, should be provided, should be used in language which is not being used, because the word accessibility doesn't just mean somebody who is physically disabled but has an invisible disability also, like people who cannot speak, people who cannot hear, people who cannot see. We need a good system which would provide access for us. I am a person who uses a wheelchair, and I'm an activist with our Disabled in Action and Adapt ADAPT. So that's my pet peeve: access.
Thank you so much, Guy. Go ahead, Amani, if you have anything to respond to that.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you for the advocacy work that you do. So especially on the transit side, you'll see that in several of our major regional projects. So right now, SEPTA and New Jersey Transit are any station that they're renovating or improving. You'll see that it's related to making all of their facilities ADA compliant. So you'll see it across, I didn't share it, but if you go, you'll see the Broad Street line, regional rail stations, the Walter Rand station in Camden in Camden City. You'll see there's some improvements that are planned on the Atlantic City line in New Jersey Transit. But yes, this is definitely an issue. We want a system that works for everyone. So thank you for bringing it up, and it's something that we care about here as well at DVRPC, and that our transit agencies are working towards. It costs a lot of money, and they put the money down. So now it's the implementation.
Thank you again. And there'll be, if you want to keep talking more about accessibility, Guy, we can do that more in the breakout room later on. Next up, we're gonna have Ethan Fogg on the tip.
Alrighty, everyone hear me all right? Sorry. Alrighty, so good evening, excuse me. My name is Ethan Fogg. I am the Capital Program Coordinator in the Office of Capital Programs. So I am here this evening to present the TIP, also known as the Transportation Improvement Program, and what it is and why it's important. So try and think of the transportation planning process as a progression or walking up steps. So the first step is planning or the long-range plan. So as presented earlier by Mai, this is focused on the vision of the region and focus on where we want to go. The next step is capital program, analyzing what it will take and what resources we have, as we cannot spend what we don't have. And the final step is project implementation and evaluation of implementing the project. So you can view the TIP as in the middle, located in capital program. All right, so the TIP is a list of priority federal and state funded capital transportation projects in the region. It must be consistent with the long-range plan, congestion management process, and air quality conformity. The TIP is required for us to spend federal dollars and to receive federal funding for the region to support transportation projects. It is a multi-year program that is updated every 2 years in the DVRPC region. We are required to maintain a best estimate of project schedules and costs, while also maintaining fiscal constraint, which means within budget. The TIP has a time frame of 4 years. New Jersey TIP has a 10-year planning horizon, while Pennsylvania has a 12-year planning horizon. It's a financial document that's updated every year. State DOTs, a larger STIP, which means the statewide transportation improvement program. It provides studies and projects. The TIP is not a grant of money. It's based on reimbursements, and it is not guaranteed funding. So the TIP is multimodal, which means that the TIP funds various transportation improvement projects. Such examples would include bicycle and pedestrian improvements, bridge repair and replacement, and transit improvements, as well as other improvements that are listed on the slide. So regional consensus is crucial, as federal and state governments want to make sure that public support and buy-in is on publicly funded projects. DVRPC strives to provide as many opportunities as possible for residents to be informed and to be able to provide feedback and comments. My colleague Allison Dressman will further delve into this in her presentation after mine. The TIP receives many forms of funding to the region. So one of our biggest forms of funding that we receive is regional formula funding. So this is federally designated funding that must be used towards projects that address certain improvements. For example, our NHPP funding addresses pavement preservation projects. STBGP funding is our urbanized funding. So this funding funds our local New Jersey projects and its various type of improvements. And HSIP funding funds safety-focused projects. Other forms of funding include asset management on state projects to fund state-funded projects. So through New Jersey, this is funded through the statewide program. And through Pennsylvania, this is funded through the Interstate Management Program for interstate roadways. Other forms of funding we receive are discretionary funds. So these would be, example of these would be recently awarded funding from the IIJA or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. What's also not, so example would be what's not listed on C are rail vehicle replacement funds to fund the replacement of the Margaret Frankfurt line and reconnecting communities funding for the Chinatown Stitch project. As well as reoccurring additional funds. These funds are either distributed competitively or discretionary. Some examples include Arley funding, multimodal funding, and Greenlight Go funding. So this bar chart shows the current breakdown of funding on the fiscal year 24 New Jersey tip. So Camden County has received the most amount of funding among the counties, because the reason why is that Camden County has the most projects ready to go for construction, and construction costs the most amount of money among all the phases. So it can vary. Whichever county receives the most funding can vary from year to year. As some years, Burlington County can receive more funding because they have more projects going for construction. So the funding is all dependent on when a project is ready to be delivered. So here's a breakdown of funding for the Pennsylvania tip. The funding that SEPTA and PART receive come from Federal Transportation Administration dollars, or FTA dollars. The funds that county receive come from Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA funding, and then the Interstate Management Program, the IMP, and PennDOT Transit funded project are allocated at the state level. So the impact of the IIJA, or Bipartisan Infrastructure, on the draft fiscal year 2025 tip for Pennsylvania has led to almost $4 billion in highway and bridge funding, which is available to the region over the first 4 years. The region has received numerous amount of federal competitive grant awards that will contribute to advancing the vision and goals of the Connections 2050 plan. And this awarded funding is also additional funding to a region, which goes beyond the core federal funds that the DVRPC region has received. So the tip is maintained throughout its life. So once it's become effective, it is updated every 2 years, even though federal requirements say that a tip must be updated every 4 years. But in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, we update every 2 years to make sure the costs, schedules, and priorities are up to date as possible. So methods of updating tip are through tip actions, which there are 2 different types of actions, which are administrative and formal actions. Our formal actions must go before the DVRPC board for review and approval. And if to learn more about what will constitute a formal action and administrative action, you can read our tip MOU. All right, so this slide shows how a project report will look like. So you would have your title, county, project description, and timing in regards to the cost and source of funding and when it will be implemented. I'd also like to point out that the tip is not a construction timeline. It is a financial document, meaning that when a construction phase is programmed in a certain year, that does not mean that construction will begin that year. So now we will be moving on to examples of projects that were on the tip that were implemented. So my first example is the Vine Street Expressway, which builded pedestrian bridges to better connect the city of Philadelphia. The next project was the I-295, I-76 Route 42 Direct Connection Project. This project will build a new bridge to address congestion and allow for better traffic flow. This project has received a lot of feedback throughout its time on the tip, and the cost of the project is up to $100 million due to its large size. It has been broken out into 4 different projects, or also known as contracts on the project. Another project that we have implemented is the Newtown Rail Trail, which builded a 2.5-mile multi-use trail in Bucks County that would connect to Montgomery County. Another project on the tip in New Jersey was County Route 654, County Route 630 to County Route 651, which restored the existing pavement surface and pedestrian facilities to meet ADA compliance, as well as provide a pedestrian connection at the Jefferson Hospital campus to Washington Township High School complex and Veterans Park and Municipal Police campus, as well as improved operational improvements in the intersection. And then another one I'm presenting for the transit improvements is the Fifth Street Independence Hall Station renovation. This was to renovate the existing Fifth Street Independence Hall Station for the Market Frankfurt line. And to learn more about our projects on the tip, you can utilize our web map tool on our website. So with this tool, as on the screen, we have a list of projects for the fiscal year 24 tip for New Jersey. Here you can find a location of where our projects are located. And if you'd like to learn more about the project, you can click on the project and you'll have information for project description, as well as the construction, as well as the timeline for implementation and cost and source of funding for different phases. So I'd like to announce that we will be open our public comment period on May 23rd at 5 p.m. for the draft fiscal year 2025 tip for Pennsylvania. My colleague Allison Dressman in the next presentation will further delve into this and discuss this more. And we will also be holding public meetings for the tip, air quality conforming documents, and long-range plan amendment. So our first meeting will be held online through Zoom on Monday, June 10th at 6 p.m. And then our second meeting will be held the day after. This will be a hybrid, so it'll be done online and in person. This will be held Tuesday, June 11th at 6 p.m. in the DVRPC main conference room. So I'd like to thank everyone for their time this evening, and I'll take questions.
If anyone has any questions for Ethan regarding his presentation, please do not hesitate to raise your hand or to throw something into the chat box. We have time for a couple questions. Not seeing any questions. Again, we'll have a lot of opportunities to ask questions and discussion during the breakout room. We're going to go on to Allison Dressman.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Dressman, and I also work with Ethan on the tip here at DVRPC in our Office of Capital Programs. Tonight, I am going to dive a bit deeper into how projects are selected to be in the tip and how folks from the region can provide feedback on the tip now and throughout the rest of the year. So first, where do tip projects come from? So projects can originate from identified needs at the municipal level, from studies, outreach findings, and other resident concerns. Cities and counties may act as project sponsors and bring the project forward to be considered for the tip. Project proposals can also be developed at the county and state levels in a similar way. And then additionally, as you see here, the transit and the DOTs, Department of Transportation's, and transit operators like SEPTA and NJ Transit identify projects using their asset management systems. And so the data there will monitor the transportation network, such as pavement, bridges, and signs. And then using that data, they can determine where maintenance and improvement projects are needed most. So DVRPC really relies on our stakeholders to bring these projects forward. We work with them to prioritize among all the different projects that we receive. And since we're constrained financially, and we can't fund everything, as Ethan kind of just went over, we can only program so many on the tip, so that prioritization is really key. So next I will walk through the steps that a project takes from applying to be on the tip to the point where it makes it onto the tip during project selection. So the first step is calling for projects. Project sponsors complete an online project intake form, or it's kind of like an online application, which details all the project information, so we can get all of that, including the scope and budget, some of the intended outcomes, the reasons for the project, location, all the details. And projects are then screened to make sure that major regional projects are funded in the long-range plan before moving into the TIP, and then to also test for projects' consistency with the long-range plan principles of equity, resiliency, and sustainability. So this includes screening for environmental justice, congestion impacts, and floodplain and sustainability concerns. So projects go through this screening and they can either advance or not. And then the projects that advance from the screening step will move on to an evaluation phase. So similar to the long-range plan for evaluation, we also use our plan to project evaluation criteria, which Amani detailed earlier. And using the most recent data available, this tool really helps us evaluate each of the candidate projects according to a number of considerations. As you can see here, so safety, centers and form, facility asset conditions, and the list goes on. So here's kind of how it works. Projects receive points for satisfying different elements of the criteria. So for example, a project with proven safety strategies that respond to a high crash location can receive up to 1 point for safety. So 0 is the least that a project can earn for each criterion, and then 1 is the highest score. And so the projects are evaluated for each one of these that you see here, and then all the points are added up and then weighted, which is what all the percentages here are telling us is the weight of each one. So the criteria are based on the plan's 4 focus areas: environment, communities, transportation, and economy. And this past year, we worked with our TIP subcommittees to update the criteria and weights that are part of this tool. And as Amani pointed out, safety is the highest weighted criterion at over 23%, and equity is weighted more than 12%. And I'll just go into that kind of briefly. So a project's equity score is based on the IPD composite score for each of the census tracts that a project touches. So kind of the area around it and where the project is located. And projects can also score here based on a set of potential benefits and burdens that are expected from each of the candidate projects. So the results of this whole evaluation by themselves don't really tell us much, but they can help us compare projects against each other, giving us a starting point for that prioritization. So we can compare projects by looking at their total evaluation points or scores and ranking them, as well as considering things like cost versus benefit and other ranking methods like that. So once we have the evaluations complete and have project scores, we work with our TIP subcommittee to select projects. So the project evaluation results are definitely a key consideration for project selection, but they are not the only consideration. This slide lists some of the additional factors that contribute to whether a project makes it onto the TIP or not. And some of the examples here include project readiness, assessment of local commitments, impact on equity, and the availability of the funding source. So now I'll go over just a general timeline of a TIP project to get us all familiar. This is from developing the need or the idea into a project all the way through to construction. And so first, the needs identified and alternatives are developed. This is the work that can be done before a project is submitted to be on the TIP, and where local outreach can play an important role. Then we get into kind of the area that reflects the flow chart that I began the presentation with, where we solicit projects from our partners. And the rest of the timeline shows the different phases of a project once it is on the TIP, and then what phases the TIP can provide funding for. So a lot of time is covered here on this graphic. Typically, the preliminary engineering, which is the big design phase, can take upwards of a year to complete. Final design, right-of-way, and utilities, for example, combined, all of those can be as short as 9 months or even as long as multiple years to complete. So that really depends on the project. But just to kind of give you an idea of just how much time can go by. And so when a project does get on the tip, you won't see it constructed right away, since it really takes time to complete all the steps that are involved in project delivery. So here's this balance again. When developing the tip, it's really important to have everyone on the same page regionally. As we're probably all aware, and as has been mentioned multiple times, there's never enough money to go around and to provide for every improvement that our region needs. So the tip is kind of like a game plan for our transportation projects and funding, and it's based on what our state and regional leaders agree are the most important things to work on right now, given the limited funds. So getting all of the stakeholders to agree is really essential because it means that everyone has had a say in what's important before we spend all these large sums of money on different projects. But at the same time, your feedback is also a crucial part of the process. As Ethan mentioned earlier, the government also wants to know that people, like the general public, is on board with these publicly funded projects as well, and that projects are fulfilling the needs of different communities in our region. So one of the ways that DVRPC offers opportunities for residents to speak up on decisions that are shaping the future of our region is by asking the public to comment on our draft tips each year before they get adopted. So I'm going to review some tips to help you craft an effective public comment, particularly for this year's update of the Pennsylvania tip. So public comments are a key way that we solicit feedback from the public. A 30-day public comment period opens after the tip is drafted. And as Ethan already mentioned, this year it will open on May 23rd, which is in 2 days. And you might decide that you want to provide comments on the tip, but where do you begin? The tip itself can be a little overwhelming. So a good place to start is by reviewing the descriptions for the projects that are included in the tip, specifically regarding the project type and some of the intended outcomes. And then from there, you can craft a comment providing your thoughts on the different projects. There are a number of different ways to put your thoughts into a comment, including sharing feedback on a specific project. Feedback is not necessarily, don't think of it as like a vote for or against a project, but providing your feedbacks on specific projects is really helpful in understanding how the public feels about the tip and how we're prioritizing things and things like that. Sometimes you get really broad comments on the tip, and those can kind of maybe not like make it a little harder for us to actually use the feedback when it isn't specific. And comments can also be questions, so they don't have to be like just a comment or, you know, what you think about something, but you can also be asking about a project. That is also a form of public comment. So I want to provide some prompts on this slide that you can use when writing a public comment. Some of these include, with this portfolio of projects on the tip, are we meeting the needs of the region? Are we focusing on projects that address our regional goals of equity, sustainability, resilience, climate change, safety, and asset condition? Are we investing in the right types of projects? So this list is not exhaustive, but it can give you some ways to kind of evaluate your thoughts on the tip and give you some ways to react. And these slides will be available after the presentation for you to revisit. I know I'm not reading every single one of these, but you can revisit these as a guide. And then some additional tips to increase effectiveness is to be concise. Your message might be easier to understand if you highlight the main points of what you're trying to get across. There is no minimum or maximum length that you should try to reach to be effective. Another one is to try to address trade-offs and opposing views in your comment. As I stated earlier, the entire tip project process is about balancing trade-offs. So when you're commenting, including or acknowledging those trade-offs or how you might address opposition to your position can strengthen your message. And then instead of just saying you agree with a project, you can also, or disagree or agree with a project, you can also offer alternative ideas, like where else you'd like to see the money go, or what alternative type of project should be prioritized. And then you can also back up your feedback with information, reasoning for your claims, if you have relevant personal or professional experience, you can also include those. And so now you're ready to comment, but how do you do it? We take public comments in 3 ways on our web app, by email and by traditional mail. And if you need assistance in providing a comment, we also offer that. You can contact the DVRPC Office of Communications and Engagement, and the information for that is I think going to be put into the chat. And so one more thing before I wrap up. Ethan briefly touched on this, but the TIP is a living plan and continues to change on a monthly basis after adoption. So when we make changes to the TIP, as he said, they are amendments or modifications, and this could include adding a project to the TIP or changing how much funding is allocated to a project. Some of those formal changes are voted on by our board as TIP actions, and we do take public comments on those and share them with the board. So you can use the guidance we just discussed to provide effective public comments on those monthly TIP actions too, and we hope that you do. And also during the TIP public comment periods, PennDOT holds a 15-day public comment period. And those comments filter down to the MPOs across the state, including us, DVRPC. And then they also have a 30-day public comment period on the statewide version of the TIP. And you can find more information at the last link that I have here at talkpatransportation.com. And finally, I know that Ethan already went over this, but I just want to remind you of the public comment period opening in 2 days, and then it closes on the 24th of June, and then the 2 public meetings that we have, the one online and the one in person with the hybrid option. So we'd love to see you at either of them. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Before you walk away, there was a question in the chat. Did the NJ comment period already pass? I'm confusing the timeline, which makes total sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. It does get really confusing between the two. So the New Jersey TIP was drafted last year. And so the public comment period would have been when that was still in the draft before it was adopted, and it has since been adopted. So this year we're developing and updating the Pennsylvania version.
Thank you. And speaking of New Jersey, we'll move on to Tom now to talk a little bit more about how the TIP and the LRP show up on the ground. Tom? Tom, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yep.
Just make sure I'm set up real quick. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Stanikinitz, and I am the county planner here at Burlington County. I work in the engineering department, and prior to that, I worked in the economic development department. So tonight I'm going to speak about economic development projects that we participated in along the Delaware River in Burlington County. The area, again, is along the Delaware River from Palmyra through Riverside up to Burlington City and Florence Township. It also borders the Route 130 corridor. So that's the area that we're going to talk about tonight. So let me start by saying things take time. Planning is a long process, sometimes decades. There's a lot of ingredients that go into making a city or a town great. There's land use, transportation, infrastructure, open space, recreational facilities, historical sites, farmland preservation. So you really need to have a plan to kind of look to see where you're going. And it's also important to have a cooperative effort and have everybody on board. So through this process, the county and the municipalities have worked with private developers, with DVRPC, the state, residents, other public agencies and nonprofit groups. And we all kind of came together through this process, which again, took time to come up with a vision for the corridor. So things kind of started out in the late 1990s when the county land use planning department put together an economic development plan. It was endorsed by the State Planning Commission back in 1999. So we're talking 25 years. And the plan, which is rather thick, a couple hundred pages, goes through some major goals of attracting new jobs, improving the quality of life for the residents, initiating positive change and improvement, encouraging development and redevelopment. And this plan was kind of ahead of its time, where we spent quite a few pages on equity and making sure that the redevelopment was positive for everyone involved. So a few years after that plan came out, the New Jersey Transit River Line was constructed, and this light rail system runs between Camden and Trenton through Burlington County, which there's 11 stations. Almost every town in Burlington County has a stop. Prior to COVID, the annual passenger trips were about 2,700,000. It's been gone. It went down during COVID, but it's slowly climbing back up. Using the light rail line, there's connections to Philadelphia, Trenton. You could get to Atlantic City through a transfer. So a lot of people are using the river line to not only go to their jobs, but also visitors coming into the Burlington County area along the river. So at the time that the plan first came out, the region was going through economic problems. There was definitely some old abandoned industrial areas that needed some TLC. As you can see by some of the numbers here, unemployment, poverty rate was higher in these communities than in Burlington County and New Jersey, but the incomes were lower, vacancy rates were high. We were experiencing a lot of renters, and the population was declining. Basically, in the 80s and early 90s, commercial areas and were leaving the Route 130 corridor that was built up in the 60s and 70s to the newer commercial areas along Interstate 295 in Mount Laurel and Evesham, and areas that had more direct connection to the interstate highway system. These areas also had historical populations that were overburdened and underserved. There's a lot of different demographics here. We have a lot of Hispanics. We have a high Brazilian population, a Turkish population. There's a lot of different minority populations in this area. So this was an area that we really wanted to focus on to help get some economic development generated. So with the help of the DVRPC, the county and the municipalities work together to produce various studies, reports, and presentations to really analyze the problems and the issues to see what's going on and what were the fixes. So we looked at the small towns along the river line, but we also looked at the suburban areas along Route 130. And this is just a small sample of the reports that were done between 1999 and today. There was a lot of work done, and I'm going to go through a few of the products of that. One of them was called the 2002 DVRPC report on transit village design. It encouraged transit-oriented development along the rail stations, so to kind of bring the population back to the older towns and the older communities that were very walkable, pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, and had high densities of residential and commercial development. We conducted a market analysis to show how it could happen and include a funding sources so the municipalities knew not just what to do, but where to get the money to move forward. There was recommendations on many towns along the corridor, most notably in Roebling, Burlington City, Riverside, and the Beverly Edgewater Park Station. So this is just some examples from the report that was done in 2002. In the upper top right-hand corner is Roebling with Hornberger Avenue reimagined. Next to that is the Golden Triangle in Riverside to see how the watch case area and the waterfront could be redeveloped. Below that is the area along the transit line on the boundary of Beverly and Edgewater Park to show how that could be walkable to the commuters. That's one of our busiest stations in Burlington County. Then to the left is a diagram of Burlington City to see how maybe some zoning changes and ordinances could help bolster the economy and bring back retail to the city of Burlington. Another part of the puzzle was the county and the Economic Development Department provided municipal planning assistance to communities that just didn't have the resources to take on all the work that they needed to do by themselves. So we worked with Cinnaminson, Burlington City, Edgewater Park, Riverside, Beverly City, to name a few, just to kind of help them prepare plans and examine and analyze their existing land use conditions and their vacant areas where they had high vacancies and kind of imagine what could be done in those areas. And as was stated in previous presentations, none of this could have been done without public involvement. These were a lot of late night meetings with the public, looking over maps, listening to presentations. You can see that we had one meeting that was strictly with school-age children who we gave different color blocks to, so they could imagine where, for example, the blue parks would go, where the yellow residential areas would go, and where the red commercial areas may go. So that was a really neat way of including all ages, because I think it's really important to get a variety of age groups and backgrounds to the meetings, especially the youth, because we're hoping that they're the ones that are going to grow up in that city and stay there or go to school and come back to those cities and see them grow. The municipalities, obviously, New Jersey being a home rule state, had to take a lot of responsibility to get things done. They couldn't just rely on the county, the DVRPC, and the state for help. They really needed to kind of get the ball rolling. And by one of the things that they started was designating areas need a redevelopment. So this told the developers, this is where we want to concentrate new growth in our communities. And in many aspects, developers would get some sort of benefit by developing in those areas, whether perhaps higher densities or some tax incentives, payments in lieu of taxes. So in order to do that, there was new zoning and new ordinances that were designed for these redevelopment areas to really spur new growth in this area. And again, making sure that what the town's vision was included in their plans. Because when the municipalities go to the state or go to federal agencies for money, they want to know, is this project in a plan? And then a lot of times, especially in state planning resources, if what you're going for the funding for is an already an established plan, you get some more points for that. So it's very important to make sure that your plans are consistent with your vision and your goal. Again, the municipalities and the counties, we couldn't do it on our own. We really needed assistance from the state. Going through what the state calls plan endorsement was a big part of it. And state plan endorsement basically tells the state, that demonstrates to the state that the municipalities are doing their job. They're doing good planning. So all their plans are up to date. Their zoning maps are consistent. Their ordinances are consistent with the goals of the state. So there's 8 overarching goals that the state has. And when the municipalities demonstrate that they're consistent with those, they kind of move up in the line when state funding comes out. And there's a lot of other different programs for towns in New Jersey. For example, the Transit Village designation. There's only a few of them in South Jersey, and we're lucky enough that Burlington City and Riverside participate in that program. The DOT has a local aid program that many municipalities have taken advantage of. Green Acres and the Department of Community Affairs has their community development block grants and their neighborhood preservation programs. And I definitely have to give a plug, of course, to the DVRPC, who again has helped us facilitate a lot of our public meetings and has prepared reports through some of their different programs. The picture shows the City of Burlington downtown circulation plan that was just done, I believe, in 2021 with DVRPC funding. There's a couple other reports that you can see that were funded through the DVRPC. And lastly, the county has supported the municipalities. Many of the projects that have been implemented in the areas, some of the traffic signaling or the road improvements. We have a few roundabouts in this area. They were funded through the TIP. Also, our county trails and open space works very closely with the DVRPC Circuit Trail program. That's basically regional trails. There's a trail that the East Coast Greenway is called, goes from Maine to Miami, goes through the DVRPC region, and the Delaware River Heritage Trail runs through the through this area along these small towns in Delaware River, and we're building it piece by piece. So this is a new segment, a picture of a new segment that goes through Delran, Riverside, and Delanco, and slowly but surely, piece by piece, the trail is becoming more off-road than on-road, and hopefully one day the trail will be completely off-road. So just to give you some examples, on the top left-hand corner was Tobble's Mill, and that was demolished to make way for the new market rate apartments called the Mill at Riverside. These are were built recently. You can see that picture was under construction, but it's all completed now, and it's about 90% occupied. This is giving more households in Riverside to shop in the downtown area. Next up is the Watch Case Center. So it's a picture of the Watch Case Tower, which is right next to the Riverside train station. That will be built into apartments with retail and commercial on the bottom floor. And there's a few other areas of town that are next up in line for redevelopment. In Burlington City, they just built the Pearl Point apartments. that are right on the Delaware River, a great view of the Delaware River and the park along the waterfront. These are brand new and they tie right into downtown. A lot of these downtowns really need more rooftops to get people to shop there. People kind of think and say, hey, we have enough homes, we have enough residential, we need more commercial. Well, first you got to get the residential development there. You got to get the rooftops there to spur more people downtown. And it's definitely happening. And of course, the train station is helping. In the top left-hand corner is the old US pipe building that is going through redevelopment. And the city has some really great plans for a possible entertainment center in that area. This is Riverton in New Jersey. And you can see at the bottom left-hand corner, that was the old Thriftway supermarket in Riverton, which was replaced through the redevelopment process with the CVS pharmacy. And then in the lower right-hand corner is another example of a redevelopment that happened right in the downtown area. The post office is down there, and that's a mixed-use building. The town just opened recently a new brewery in downtown that's attracting a lot of people to the borough. So we're getting a lot of development, new development, and it's really expanding throughout. And next up, I think the next hot spot is Beverly City and Edgewater Park. They're starting to rehabilitate some of the buildings downtown, and there's plans to do some more waterfront development, as well as some transit-oriented development along the train station. So things are starting to happen. They definitely take a while, but we're seeing some great improvements, and we're hoping that it continues. So I want to thank everybody for hanging on and listening to my presentation. And if you have any questions or thoughts or would like to email me after the meeting, that's my contact information. So feel free to reach out. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the DVRPC.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for your great presentations. In lieu of going to breakout rooms, we're just going to quickly do questions here, since our attendance has kind of gone a little bit slimmer. So we can start with Nyla. Nyla, I don't know if Nyla's still here, actually. Yeah, Nyla left, but for everyone else, Nyla's question is it the DVRPC board making the final decision on which projects get on? If so, what method do you take to get an understanding and agreement amongst the board on the priorities and values in the list from the slides? I believe this was in reference to the TIP priorities. So she also says safety, equity, etc. So whoever wants to respond to that.
Yeah, I could take that one, or Rick, if you want to take it.
We can tag team. I'll let you start and I'll finish.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I think Rick and I were side chatting about it. I think a big part of it is that we work really closely with the counties throughout developing the TIP. So we work with kind of the staff that works under the board members at the regional technical committee level. So they're involved in lots of meetings. We have a group that's called the PA TIP subcommittee, and they're kind of like a subgroup of the RTC. So they're involved throughout. They attend a whole series of meetings about developing the TIP. As Allison described, we have a method to evaluate new projects that really, takes all the different factors into consideration. And then really the bulk of the projects on any given TIP are kind of carrying over from the prior TIP. So they've either already gone through some kind of evaluation or they've been around for quite some time, and we sort of understand how they're helping the region advance towards its goals. The other thing, and just kind of a plug for the TIP document that's going out for public comment, is we try to do some analysis in the document, looking at things like how the set of projects will help move us towards federal performance measures, which align pretty closely with our LRP goals as well. We have a whole chapter that gets really deep into equity analysis, and a lot of different things like that we try to put into the TIP document. And then, of course, when we present the tip, which will be in July, we'll present it to the RTC and then the board. We also include all the public comments that we received during the public comment period, as well as all the agency responses that we help facilitate through that process, so the board can kind of consider that, you know, as they're adopting the tip. So they don't necessarily go through and like look at project by project. There's really too much on there, but there's a ton of coordination involvement over a span of months, if not years, to kind of keep them in the loop. So, Rick, I don't know if there's more you want to add there.
Yeah, it's specifically about what you just said about the board members, not specifically reviewing every single project. They might, but we don't know. But we do know that their staff does look at every single thing because they provide us feedback and in detail of how things should be programmed with, and then project descriptions. And so there is, as Jesse was saying, there is a lot of coordination that goes on between our staff and our board member staff with creating the document. Another thing with regards to Nyla's comment that I want to talk about is when it says that the values in the list from the slides, like safety, equity, so that's referring to our long range plan tip evaluation criteria. So that criteria was presented to our board in 2023 and they adopted that. And so those new criteria are what we use to score new candidate projects for the tip. And as Jesse was saying, yes, we do. The bulk of the tip right now is carryover projects from previous tips that had gone through previous criteria selection. But anything that has to do with federal dollars, unfortunately, takes a very long time to go through the federal process. And so they get through the criteria then. But now with new projects, we use this new evaluation criteria. And when we update the criteria in maybe 5, 6, 7 years, or maybe even earlier, if the board decides that we should do it earlier, we will do that. And then any new projects will be evaluated under that lens.
Thank you. Tom, you already responded to this question in the chat from Lillian about working with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Planning to prepare a climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment. There's a question here from Imani Badin. She says, great job to Tom and Tom only, and just wanted to know more about air and water quality and crime stats. So I don't know if you want to speak about that, Tom.
The water quality is mostly a municipal issue. Each of the municipalities have green teams or environmental commissions that work with the state and nonprofits like Sustainable New Jersey, where they get funding to do water quality assessments. And we work with the DVRPC as far as air quality. As far as crime stats, crime, there's really not a crime problem along the river line. I remember when I first graduated college back in 1995, I went to a couple of public hearings about the river line, and that was the one thing that people were really nervous about was crime would increase with the river line, and it hasn't. And I think that other towns have seen that, and that's why the Glassboro residents are saying, "Hey, this light rail isn't as bad as we thought it might be." Yeah, we want that as well because the crime really hasn't increased with Riverline.
Thank you. And we have one more question before we have to wrap up. If anybody has any more questions, everybody's contact information was shared tonight, and you'll have the opportunity to ask us questions. The last one was referring to another line by Jarrett, which was answered by Jesse. Thank you, Jesse. But I don't know if Jesse, you want to say more about this, or Tom, you have anything to say about this? Jarrett says, I have heard that there were talks of a Glassboro-Camden line. Are there any discussions about the possibility of making it into reality, and is it included in the proposal or is it separate?
So yeah, I could summarize kind of what I said here. Yeah, it's definitely it's a really important project, and it's interesting because they're kind of trying to use toll authority funds. So the South Jersey Transportation Authority has some of their own funding, and they're working with New Jersey Transit and also DRPA PATCO to kind of like advance the early feasibility studies and design work, but they're hoping to construct it without necessarily using federal funds, using kind of a mix of state and toll authority funds. So if they're able to continue on that track, it sounds like it could get built fairly quickly. Like the right of way exists, there is kind of an existing freight rail line there. There would need to be some improvements, but the design is actually progressing. And from what I've heard, it's possible that they could start going to construction relatively soon and open it on a much faster timeline than I would have thought possible. So hopefully that all continues. I put the link to their website in there. I think they're having some different public meetings, so great, to chime in on those. There's some towns along the line that don't want to have stops, which I think they're going to really regret in the future. But quite a few are very open to it, and I know Gloucester County is already starting to think about how they improve the connections to the future stations. And I think they'll really see, like a lot of other lines, like things like the PATCO high-speed line. It can really revitalize towns and bring a lot of activity to the downtowns along that stretch. So it's an exciting project, and hopefully one that we'll see happening relatively soon. Although again, it probably will not appear on the tip if they don't use federal funds, although I'm sure we'll note it somewhere and mention it. It just won't be necessarily like listed among the federally funded projects.
Thank you so much, Jesse. So we're going to wrap up the meeting now, but for anybody who has questions, again, the DVRPC staff and other presenters are going to be on a little bit after we officially close the meeting. So if you have any questions, feel free to stay on and ask us questions. But before anyone who has to leave at 7:30 leaves, Shoshana is going to remind us one more time about the public comment period, so no one forgets.
Yes, thank you. So now that you know all of these things about these two different documents, maybe that piqued your interest on the public comment period. So the dates for the LRP and the TIP are going to be May 23rd at 5, so just in 2 days, and will end on June 24th. And then there's the conformity public comment period, which starts June 4th and will end July 8th. You can find all of the documents online. There also will be mailings to a lot of public libraries, the major public libraries in the region. So you might be able to find one at your local library. And you can submit public comments by mail, email, or in person. There will be a public notice going out tomorrow. So if you want to get that in your inbox, you can sign up for our public participation and public notices email list, which Gina put in the chat earlier, but you can put it in again, so you can sign up there just in case. So that's everything that we have. I see that, Guy, you have your hand raised, but I'm going to let Wendell end the meeting, and then we can talk.
Yes, guys, totally saw it. So for anyone who has to leave at 7:30, just a reminder, stay in touch with DVRPC. That's what we're here for. So sign up for the newsletter. It should be in the chat. Check out our event calendar on our website. Apply to become a PPTF member if you really enjoy what you heard today and you want to get more involved. And don't forget to connect with us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and I'm sure other places are not mentioned. So if you have to leave at 7:30, thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoyed presenting to y'all. And if you have questions and want to stay and hang out with us and Guy, feel free. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Guy? Guy, you're muted.